Right now, the Philippines' Big One probability is spiking and the numbers are unlike anything scientists have ever seen. In the last 30 days alone, the Philippines has been hit by 847 earthquakes. The normal monthly number is 8 to 12. That is 70 times more seismic activity than usual. And every single one of those earthquakes is doing something terrifying beneath the surface. Each tremor is loading stress directly, measurably, unstoppably onto the West Valley Fault. A 100 kilometers crack splitting straight through the heart of Metro Manila. Beneath the schools, beneath the hospitals, beneath the shopping malls, the office towers, the crowded neighborhoods where 13 million people live, work, and sleep every single night. This fault has not moved since 1658. That is 368 years of pressure, locked, compressed, building deeper and harder with every passing year. Like a spring that has been squeezed for nearly 4 centuries with no release. Scientists are not debating if it breaks. Every expert who has studied this fault agrees on one thing. It will rupture. The only question is when. But here is what has seismologists in a complete panic right now. These 847 earthquakes are not random aftershocks. They are not isolated events scattered across the map. They are connected. Each one passing energy like a relay race, tremor by tremor, fault by fault, moving in a chain reaction that scientists say has never been documented at this scale in recorded history. And that chain reaction has a destination. It ends in Metro Manila. When the West Valley Fault finally snaps, the city faces 90 seconds of violent shaking. 90 seconds to collapse over 170,000 buildings. 90 seconds to kill an estimated 34,000 people. 90 seconds to leave 1 million residents with nothing but rubble where their lives used to be. And the most chilling part, no warning system on Earth can alert 13 million people in time. So, is the 2025 earthquake swarm the final trigger that unleashes the Big One? And has Metro Manila already run out of time? The West Valley Fault stretches 100 kilometers through the geographic heart of the Philippine capital. Not near it, not approaching it from the edges, directly beneath it, running under the streets, the foundations, the underground pipes and train lines of the most densely populated urban corridor in the entire country. Trace its path and the scale of the danger becomes impossible to ignore. The fault begins in Bulacan in the north, cuts southward through Quezon City, threads beneath Makati's towering financial district, runs under Pasig, Marikina, and Muntinlupa, and continues into Cavite and Laguna before it finally ends. Every major city in Metro Manila sits along this line. Every crowded neighborhood, every school filled with children, every hospital packed with patients, every high-rise office tower anchored into the ground above this geological fracture. Over 13 million people live within its immediate impact zone. Historical records make the situation even more alarming. The West Valley Fault does not rupture constantly. It builds pressure over centuries, then releases in a single catastrophic event. Scientists have identified its cycle at roughly 400 to 600 years between major ruptures. That pattern sounds distant until you apply the calendar. The last confirmed rupture of the West Valley Fault occurred in 1658. That was 368 years ago. By every geological measure available, this fault is not approaching its window. It has already passed through it. 50CS director Renadu Selam has been direct in his warnings. The West Valley Fault will move. This is not speculation. It is not a worst-case scenario buried in a risk assessment document. It is geological certainty backed by centuries of seismic data and the unanimous agreement of every scientist who has studied the system. Understanding why requires thinking about how faults actually work. Imagine a massive spring being compressed year after year, decade after decade with no release. Every day that passes without rupture adds more tension to the system. The longer the interval between events, the greater the stored energy. And that energy has only one place to go. For 368 years, tectonic forces have been loading stress onto the West Valley Fault without interruption. The Philippine Sea Plate continues pushing. The pressure continues building. The fault remains locked. When it finally breaks, Vivo LCS projects a magnitude 7.22 earthquake or higher. Ground shaking will last between 60 and 90 seconds. The fault could displace the Earth's surface by up to 4 m in some locations. The forces released will exceed the design limits of most structures standing above it today. 13 million people are living directly on top of that compressed spring, and the spring has been winding for nearly 4 centuries. The Philippines does not simply sit on fault lines. It is the fault line. The entire archipelago occupies the most complex tectonic intersection on the planet. And understanding that fact changes everything about how dangerous the West Valley Fault truly is. For massive tectonic plates converge directly beneath the 7,641 islands of the Philippine archipelago. The Philippine Sea Plate drives eastward beneath the islands with relentless force. The Pacific Plate sways westward in the opposite direction. The Eurasian Plate presses down from the north. The Sunda Plate pushes upward from the south. For geological giants, each one enormous beyond comprehension, all meeting at the same point, all pushing at the same time. All loading pressure into the same system simultaneously. Compare that to anywhere else on Earth. Japan, one of the most seismically active nations in the world, manages interactions between 2 plates. California, famous for its earthquake risk, sits along a 2-plate boundary. The Philippines deals with 4. The complexity does not simply double the danger. It multiplies it in every direction at once, creating a geological pressure cooker where stress accumulates from all sides with nowhere to escape. For centuries, this unique configuration produced a rhythm that scientists could at least anticipate. The Philippines typically recorded around 100 measurable earthquakes every year. Roughly 20 caused significant damage. Tremors occurred every few days, releasing tension gradually, keeping the system in a kind of dangerous but manageable balance. The pattern was consistent. Scientists could not predict specific events, but they understood the general frequency. It was something the country had learned to live with. But 2025 has shattered that pattern completely. The rhythm that held for generations has broken. What was predictable has turned chaotic. What was manageable has become something that has seismologists staring at their data in disbelief. What makes this collapse of the normal pattern so alarming is the way the archipelago's fault systems actually function. The West Valley Fault, the East Valley Fault, the Philippine Fault Zone, and the Manila Trench do not operate independently of one another. They are mechanically linked, connected through a process of stress transfer that runs beneath the entire country like a hidden network of pressure lines. Dr. Deo Carlo Bringing at Vivox describes it as a heartbeat pulsing beneath the entire archipelago. Each earthquake relieves tension in one location but simultaneously redistributes stress to every neighboring system connected to it. The pressure never disappears. It only moves. And right now, that pressure is building faster than anyone anticipated. The heartbeat is accelerating, and it is beating directly toward Manila. September 2025 delivered the first major warning. A magnitude 6.9 earthquake struck Cebu with devastating force. At least 79 people died. Buildings collapsed across the Visayas region. Emergency responders scrambled through rubble, searching for survivors trapped beneath concrete that had stood for decades. The disaster shocked the nation. Schools closed. Families grieved. The damage was catastrophic. But it was only the beginning. 10 days later, the situation escalated in a way that stopped seismologists cold. On October 17th, a magnitude 7.4 earthquake slammed into Mindanao with ferocious intensity. The ground shook for nearly a minute. Communities that survived the initial impact began the desperate work of rescue and recovery. Then within hours, a magnitude 6.9 aftershock followed from the same fault system. Scientists call this a double earthquake. 2 major events, same origin, rapid succession. The phenomenon is rare. The implications are terrifying. At least 10 more people died. Over 1,000 suffered injuries. Entire communities that had endured the first shock were finished off by the second. There was no time to recover between blows. Then came the number that changed everything. In the past 30 days alone, the Philippines recorded 847 earthquakes. The normal monthly average ranges from 8 to 12. That is not a slight increase. That is not a statistical anomaly. That is a 70-fold explosion in seismic activity happening right now in real time beneath one of the most densely populated nations on Earth. Microquake activity has more than doubled compared to the same period in previous years. The numbers are staggering and they are still climbing. But the raw frequency alone does not capture the true danger. What alarms scientists most is not how many earthquakes are occurring. It is the pattern emerging from advanced monitoring data. These earthquakes are not scattered independent events. Each one loads stress onto neighboring fault systems in a synchronized sequence that has never been documented before in the scientific record. Favorable CS analysis reveals something that researchers describe as unprecedented. The swarm is creating a mechanical connection spanning the entire Western Pacific. Energy from each tremor does not simply fade, it transfers. Dr. Deo Carlo Bringing explains the process with chilling clarity. Each quake relieves tension in one location but simultaneously redistributes stress to neighboring faults like a chain reaction. Pressure released in Mindanao shifts toward the Visayas. Stress from Cebu propagates northward toward Luzon. Every earthquake pushes energy closer to Metro Manila. And the West Valley Fault sits at the end of this chain. It absorbs cumulative stress from every single tremor across the archipelago. Each new earthquake, no matter where it strikes, adds more weight to a system already 368 years past its breaking point. Most people believe an earthquake is a contained event. Energy releases, the ground shakes, the danger passes, the crisis stays local, the threat stays where the fault is. That is what most people assume. And that assumption could get 13 million people killed because that is not how the planet works. When an earthquake strikes, the energy does not simply disappear into the ground beneath your feet. It travels. It propagates through the Earth's crust at 8 kilometers per second, racing outward in every direction, physically pushing on distant fault lines and fundamentally changing their stability. Scientists call this process Coulomb stress transfer, and it explains exactly why a magnitude 7 for earthquake in Mindanao is a direct threat to the people of Metro Manila. The science is not new. The mechanics are proven and documented repeatedly throughout history. The 1992 Landers earthquake in California triggered seismic events across multiple American states hundreds of miles away. The 2004 Sumatra earthquake affected fault systems across the entire Pacific Basin. The 2012 Indian Ocean magnitude 8.6 earthquake created cascading pressure shifts that reached all the way to Japan. Every time the pattern is the same. Energy released in one place loads stress onto the next fault in line. The dominoes fall in sequence. What makes 2025 different is the speed and the scale. Previous stress transfer events took days or even weeks to propagate across fault networks. The patterns emerging right now are happening in minutes to hours. 7 major fault systems are responding simultaneously to Philippine earthquake activity. Coordinated seismic movement at this speed and across this geographic range has never been documented in scientific history. Dr. Ross Stein from the United States Geological Survey describes the situation with striking clarity. What is happening in the Philippines is earthquake clustering on an international scale. The archipelago is not just generating local events. It is mechanically connected to fault systems spanning the entire Western Pacific. And the energy moving through that network has a very specific destination. Each Mindanao earthquake loads pressure onto Luzon fault systems. Each Visayas aftershock pushes stress northward through the crust. The Manila Trench shows dangerous pressure accumulation along its entire length. The Philippine Sea Plate boundary registers elevated seismic background activity that scientists describe as deeply abnormal. And at the end of this cascading chain of pressure transfer sits the West Valley Fault, absorbing cumulative stress from every tremor across the archipelago, compressing further with each passing day. The domino effect is not a theory. It is not a worst-case model or a scientific hypothetical. It is measurable. It is documented and it is accelerating, and every single domino is falling directly toward Manila. The moment the West Valley Fault ruptures, Metro Manila faces between 60 and 90 seconds of violent shaking. That is it. 90 seconds. Ground acceleration will exceed the design limits of most buildings in the city before anyone has time to react, before anyone has time to run. The destruction will not build slowly. It will arrive all at once. PHIVOLCS and the Metro Manila Development Authority have run the models. The projections are catastrophic. Over 170,000 buildings will be damaged or destroyed in the initial shaking alone. High-rises in Makati and Bonifacio Global City face collapse risks from seismic forces they were simply never engineered to withstand. But it is not just the towers. The informal settlements packed with millions of residents across the metro will experience near-total devastation. Structures built without seismic standards on narrow lots crowded wall-to-wall will come down in seconds. Then comes liquefaction. Reclaimed land and low-lying areas across Metro Manila will transform into unstable shifting soil that swallows structures whole. The ground itself becomes the enemy. Schools filled with children, hospitals packed with patients, government buildings that are supposed to coordinate the emergency response, all of them sitting directly above the rupture zone, all of them facing the same forces at the same moment. Infrastructure fails in a cascading sequence that cuts the city off from itself. Bridges and elevated highways collapse, destroying the evacuation routes that millions would need to escape. The MRT and LRT systems suffer catastrophic damage, stranding commuters across the metro. Water mains rupture simultaneously, flooding the streets while leaving survivors without a single drop of clean drinking water. Gas lines snap and ignite, triggering fires that spread unchecked through neighborhoods already buried in debris. The power grid fails across the entire capital, plunging 13 million people into darkness in the middle of a disaster they cannot see. The Japan International Cooperation Agency ran detailed casualty modeling on exactly this scenario. Their worst-case projections are staggering. Over 34,000 people dead from the initial shaking alone. Injuries exceeding 100,000. More than 1 million residents displaced from homes that no longer exist. And the dying does not stop when the shaking does. Secondary deaths from fires, disease, and the collapse of medical care continue for weeks as a city struggles to function without power, water, or accessible roads. Metro Manila generates 36% of the entire Philippine economy. When the business districts fall, the financial damage extends far beyond broken buildings. Recovery will not be measured in months. Experts project timelines measured in decades. When the West Valley Fault breaks, it will not simply damage a city. In 90 seconds, it will fundamentally reshape the Philippines, and generations will spend lifetimes trying to rebuild what those 90 seconds destroyed. 50 LCS operates one of the most advanced seismic monitoring networks in the entire region. Stations positioned across the archipelago continuously track ground movement around the clock. Real-time data analysis detects earthquakes within minutes of occurrence. New monitoring stations have been deployed specifically across Metro Manila. Scientists maintain 24-hour surveillance of the full 100 kilometers West Valley Fault rupture zone. Decades of scientific investment, cutting-edge technology, a genuine commitment from some of the best seismologists in the world. And here is the brutal truth that none of that changes. When the West Valley Fault ruptures, not one of those 13 million people will get a warning in time. The reason comes down to pure physics. Stress waves travel through the Earth's crust at 8 kilometers per second. That is faster than any human system ever built. Seismic detection equipment requires 2 to 3 minutes just to analyze the initial earthquake data. Tsunami modeling needs 5 to 10 minutes to calculate wave arrival times. Coordinating international alerts between multiple countries takes 10 to 15 minutes. Issuing a public evacuation order through official warning systems takes 15 to 30 minutes minimum. For a fault running directly beneath the city, every single one of those timelines is meaningless. The shaking arrives before the first alert can be sent. The destruction begins before anyone can be told to move. 13 million people will face the big one with essentially zero advance notice. The warning infrastructure carries for critical failures that compound this problem. Each country in the region monitors its own fault systems independently with minimal coordination across borders. Tsunami simulations are built around single earthquake sources, not the kind of cascading multi-fault rupture that 2025 data is now suggesting is possible. Communication delays between nations make rapid multi-country alerts nearly impossible to execute. And data processing systems were simply never designed to handle simultaneous seismic input flooding in from multiple sources at once. The tsunami dimension makes it worse. Manila Bay sits exposed to waves generated by Manila Trench earthquakes. If multiple fault systems rupture in sequence, their tsunamis could combine through a process called wave superposition, stacking on top of each other and amplifying destruction far beyond what any current model has calculated. No existing warning protocol was designed for that scenario. Dr. Katsuichiro Gott from the University of Bristol has been direct about what this means. Cascading earthquake hazards, he says, represent an entirely new class of disaster that current monitoring infrastructure simply cannot handle. Warning systems need to be completely rethought for the age of stress transfer. The technology designed to save lives was engineered for a different era. The threats have evolved, the systems have not. And 13 million people are living inside that gap. Vivo LCS is doing everything science currently allows. Scientists maintain 24-hour surveillance of the entire 100 km rupture zone. New monitoring stations have been deployed across Metro Manila. Stress accumulation is tracked continuously around the clock every single day. Public awareness campaigns warn residents about the inevitable earthquake. The scientific community is not ignoring this threat. They are watching it closer than ever before in Philippine history. But watching a disaster approach and being able to stop it are two entirely different things because the preparedness gaps are everywhere. Building code compliance remains deeply inconsistent across the metropolis. Thousands of structures were built long before modern seismic standards existed. They have never been retrofitted. They have never been tested against forces like the ones the West Valley Fault will generate. Informal settlements housing millions of Manila's poorest residents offer essentially zero earthquake resistance. When the ground moves, those neighborhoods will not shake. They will disappear. Evacuation routes pass directly through areas that engineers already know will become impassable after major structural collapses. Emergency supply stockpiles fall catastrophically short of what 13 million people will need in the hours and days after the rupture. Community efforts provide real meaningful hope. Barangays conduct regular earthquake drills to familiarize residents with emergency procedures. Families develop emergency plans and identify safe meeting points before disaster strikes. Schools teach children the duck, cover, and hold technique. Government campaigns push every household to prepare go bags with essential supplies. These efforts matter. They genuinely save lives, but they cannot prevent the destruction. No drill prepares a family for watching their building fold in on itself. No GOG replaces a home swallowed by liquefaction. Experts are clear about what must change. Building retrofitting programs need massive expansion to strengthen the most vulnerable structures before the fault moves. Residents in the highest risk zones need relocation options, not after the earthquake, but before it. International coordination must improve dramatically to handle cascading disasters striking multiple countries simultaneously. Investment in early warning technology must accelerate. Even knowing the fundamental speed limitations that make warnings nearly impossible for a fault directly beneath the city. The psychological weight of all this presses down on 13 million people every single day. Parents drop their children at school and quietly wonder whether those walls will hold. Workers ride elevators into high-rise towers and push the same question out of their minds. Residents in informal settlements already know their homes offer no real protection. They simply have nowhere else to go. The race against geological time does not pause for budgets, politics, or indecision. Each earthquake in the ongoing swarm adds stress. Each passing day narrows the window. The fault does not wait. And right now, preparation is the only thing standing between 13 million people and the inevitable. The West Valley Fault will rupture. This is not speculation. It is not fear-mongering designed to sell headlines or fill news cycles. It is geological certainty backed by centuries of seismic data validated by decades of field research and supported by the unanimous agreement of every scientist who has studied this system in depth. The fault has ruptured before, it will rupture again. The only unknown is the exact moment when 368 years of accumulated tectonic stress finally exceeds the rock's ability to hold. And that moment is drawing closer with every tremor that shakes this archipelago. The 2025 earthquake swarm has fundamentally changed this conversation. What scientists once described as a distant but inevitable threat has transformed into a measurable accelerating danger unfolding in real time. In 30 days, 847 earthquakes have shaken the Philippines. That is 70 times the normal frequency. Each tremor loads additional stress onto fault systems already compressed beyond their historical limits. The magnitude 7. For Mindanao earthquake. The magnitude 6.9 Cebu disaster that killed 79 people. The devastating double strike that injured over 1,000 more. These are not random events scattered across a map. They are dominoes falling in sequence. And the last domino standing is the West Valley Fault directly beneath Metro Manila. The science of Coulomb stress transfer has removed all remaining doubt about the connection. Earthquakes do not respect provincial boundaries or national borders. Energy released in Mindanao propagates northward through the crust at 8 km per second, pressure shifts from the Visayas toward Luzon. The West Valley Fault absorbs cumulative stress from every tremor across the entire archipelago, sitting at the terminal point of a cascading chain reaction that grows more dangerous with each passing day. The broader implication extends far beyond Philippine shores. Scientists now recognize that fault systems across the entire Western Pacific are mechanically linked in ways that previous generations of researchers never fully understood. An earthquake in one country can load pressure onto fault systems in another within minutes. The era of isolated seismic events has ended. What 2025 has revealed is something far more unsettling. A connected, reactive geological network operating on a timeline that no government, no agency, and no warning system was ever designed to manage. For the 13 million people living above the West Valley Fault, these scientific realities are not abstract. They are the background noise of daily life. The question a parent asks when dropping a child at school. The thought a worker carries into a high-rise office every morning. The quiet fear that never fully leaves a family in an informal settlement that offers no protection at all. When the West Valley Fault finally breaks, when 13 million people face 90 seconds of destruction with zero warning, how many will survive? Because they chose to prepare for what was always inevitable. The ground beneath Manila holds that answer, and it is not waiting for anyone to be ready.